Zeus lives happily with his family on Mount Olympus, but he is hardly the only god to reside on a mountain. In fact, in another continent, Lord Shiva lives on Mount Kailash. Amun-Ra has his home on Mount Barkal. Tengri inhabits Mount Burkhan Khaldun, and this is just the tip of the iceberg of a very common pattern. When we take a look at the mythologies of the ancient Near East, the Sumerian god Enlil has his throne on Mount Ekkur. The highest Canaanite deity, El, lives on Mount Lel and has 70 sons, of whom 2 happen to be very famous. Baal, who resides on Mount Shapanu, and his brother Yahweh, the god of the Old Testament, who comes from Mount Seir. Yahweh gives the 10 Commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai, and following the Abrahamic tradition, the same God, under the name of Allah, also gives the revelations to Muhammad on Mount Hira. We could further continue, mentioning all the sacred places in Hinduism and Buddhism, such as the mythical Mount Meru, center of the metaphysical universe, Mount Fuji, the most sacred place in Shintoism, and all the other sacred mountains that were revered in the Americas, Africa, Oceania, Europe, and Asia throughout history. Mountains are central to all regions. But why? Why were mountains so holy? Chapter 1. Through the lens of our ancestors, the supernatural realm. The biggest things observable with our own eyes from the moment we are born are only 3. The surrounding watery seas we call oceans, the towering mighty rocks we call mountains, and the thin, gaseous, untouchable air above we call sky. To our tiny eyes, mountains surely look impressive. Impressive big rocks decorating the land with their might. But to our ancestors, mountains looked like frighteningly enormous gigantic rocks. The difference in perspective emerges from the fact that we have an idea of how big things can get thanks to scientific discoveries. We know the size of our planet, and we can speculate on how big the universe can get once we venture out there. But to our ancestors, such knowledge was not available, and to them, mountains were more than special. Mountains gave rise to the rivers that enabled our ancestors to farm and to create villages. People could drink and wash their clothes by the river, grow crops, enrich their diets with fresh fish, hunt animals in the forests, build houses with nearby resources, and cure themselves with plants. Some settled near volcanoes for the fertile soil, unaware of the potential danger. And in summary, for those who lived their entire lives sedentarily near mountains, those mountains may have represented the center of their world. And lacking such important discoveries that we possess today, our ancestors could only guess the shape of their known world by observing their surroundings. And this is how they imagined it. In many ancient myths, including the Bible, gods are said to separate the water from the water, or the salt water from the sweet water, because our ancestors perceived their known world as a disc-shaped island, supported by trees, columns, or similar structures, where the sweet water were the rivers nearby, which they settled for farming, and the salt water were the surrounding oceans, incredibly too vast for the eye to see the end of, and too dangerous to traverse without knowing where they could lead to. And above the surrounding seas and above the towering mountains was also a dome called sky. A dome that, if reached, would grant humans a steady connection to the heavens, where the gods were perceived to be hiding. And the closest way to get to the sky, to draw nearer to the gods, was by climbing such mountains. But climbing these enormous rocks to communicate with the gods was no simple task. The more unclimbable a mountain appeared, the more sacred it was believed to be, and reaching the peak involved crossing several layers of divine obstacles. Chapter 2. Stairways to Heaven or Staircase to Hell. The Heavenly Gateways. The foothills of these massive rocks were covered by dense forests and guarded by a host of spirits that the gods employed to ward off potential intruders. Meanwhile, in the skies above, birds and eagles were believed to surveil the area, reporting back to the gods so they could take action against such trespassers. Attempting to ascend these mountains was considered an act of defiance against the gods' commands, and such disobedience inevitably led to divine consequences. Some pilgrims were led astray, others were devoured by wild animals. Some vanished into the cold, dark night, while others succumbed to dehydration or froze to death before reaching the sacred peaks. Only a few enlightened individuals could hope to reach the summit and be welcomed into the divine realm. Even fewer could expect to communicate with the gods, and a rare few might receive the divine messages that the people below so desperately sought. The ascent up a mountain symbolized a journey toward enlightenment. For those who brave the climb, an understanding of cosmic truths and the universe's creators awaited as a divine reward. This granted the climber not only wisdom, but also the authority to serve as a mediator between worlds. Moreover, to maintain an open connection between humans and gods, pilgrims often built temples either around or on top of these mountains. But what could people hope to achieve by sending someone on the top of a mountain? Try to forget everything you know scientifically to be true and put yourself into the shoes of our ancestors. Most of our ancestors were primarily farmers, dependent on stable weather for their crops to grow and for them not to starve. Nature, however, was dangerously unpredictable, and this inconsistency was attributed to a host of invisible, moody gods. Some were good, continuously breathing life into creation, while others were evil, tirelessly undoing what had been made. This dynamic equilibrium, which we call change, was maintained through an unending cycle of creation and destruction. In early polytheistic societies, these gods symbolized the natural phenomena that affected a farmer's life. As societies transitioned to monotheism, God became synonymous with nature itself. This shift elucidates why key deities, like those mentioned at the beginning of the video, were mostly associated with lightning, thunder, winds, and rain. Lightning served as a visible symbol of upcoming rain and strong winds, and clouds acted as the celestial vehicles gods used to congregate atop mountains to observe their creation from above, while the sun and the moon were thought to be carried atop by chariots by the deities to alternate between day and night. Even in our modern religions, we can still find traces of this weather function of God. In Judaism and Christianity, in Jeremiah 10:13, New International Version, we read, "When he thunders, the waters in the heavens roar. He makes clouds rise from the ends of the earth. He sends lightning with the rain, and brings out the wind from his storehouses." And in the Quran, Islam, in Surah An-Nur 24:43, we read, "Do you not see that Allah drives clouds? Then He brings them together. Then He makes them into a mass, and you see the rain emerge from within it. And He sends down from the sky the mountains of clouds, within which is hail, and He strikes with it whom He wills, and averts it from whom He wills. The flash of its lightning almost takes away the eyesight." Sahih International. By climbing mountains and building temples to honor the gods, as well as offering valuable sacrifices, humans aim to prevent divine punishments like too little rain, too much rain, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, avalanches, and much more. Essentially, they were trying to bribe the gods by appeasing them with sweet distractions, to gain their favor and to avoid fatal natural calamities. So, humans believed they could somehow influence nature's behavior by being merciful servants to the gods. When things went well, they smugly assumed it was their virtuous servitude paying off. When calamities struck, they took it as a review of poor performance from above. They conveniently ignored the likelihood that nature may actually operate on its own undiscovered cycles. Cycles very much beyond human control, unmindful of what type of bulls, dances, magic spells, or rituals humans were performing. And a pervasive belief held that a hidden realm of eternal torment for those transgressing God's commands, condemning their society as a whole, where fire, screams, and malevolent spirits were ensnared in unending agony, was laying exactly beneath their feet. Chapter 3: Staircase to Hell, Esotericism in Magic, Witches and Sorcerers, and the Pyramids. Beneath the ground, a whole undiscovered dimension was imagined to exist, unreachable due to the human limitations of digging too deep into the soil, rendering it sacred. Near the base of the mountain, it was often believed that an axis from the heavenly stars intersected perpendicularly with the mountain's summit, plunging into the earth's crust below to sink at the bottom somewhere unknown. Upon death, different cultural beliefs took hold. In some, the soul of a virtuous person was believed to travel along the river until it reached the sun or vanished into the cosmos. In others, the soul was thought to be absorbed by the earth, descending beneath the soil into an underworld in the shape of an inverted mountain, or in the shape of a descending labyrinth. In the underworld, the souls first crossed a river by boat. They then had to pass through a gate guarded by a deity, waiting to be assigned to a specific circle on the outskirts of this colossal, inverted mountain or labyrinth. The severity of one's crimes in life determined the depth and circle of one's eternal torment. These souls were said to face a range of punishments, from being battered by fierce winds to carrying heavy weights, from drowning in their own waste to boiling in blood, and from burning in sands to being scorched alive, consumed by fires, or even dismembered for eternity. And at the underworld's lowest point, the most malevolent being was believed to reside, the ultimate source of evil, the devil himself. In many cultures, it was believed that souls were not meant to descend into an underworld. Instead, they reincarnated as animals or trees surrounding the foothills of such sacred mountains. Therefore, people were encouraged to show the utmost respect to these creatures, as they could be the reincarnations of their ancestors. Furthermore, these forests were occasionally inhabited by hermits, or individuals whom the villagers might have labeled as witches and sorcerers. These figures were thought to trade their souls for mystical abilities like foresight and alchemy, empowering them to control animals and craft healing potions from magical plants. Such magicians were believed to communicate with the dead and to perform rituals and dances under the moonlight to summon powerful dark forces. Lastly, due to the challenging nature of climbing these sacred mountains, many civilizations built mountain-like structures to facilitate the ascension towards the heavens and the descent towards the underworld, where our ancestors preserved the bodies of their leaders, turning them into burial sites too. These colossal buildings, such as the ziggurats in Mesopotamia, the pyramids in Egypt, and the pyramids in Mesoamerica, allowed priests to more easily observe their rituals. Did you find this video informative? If so, here are some additional videos on the origins of the gods and religions you will not want to miss. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.